Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Shadowlands Alpha data mining video. It's the first one, and as is tradition around here, we are going to begin by taking a look at the new mounts that we can expect to collect in this expansion. It's an incredibly exciting time. There's going to be a lot of content from us, so expect that, and especially today, if you're interested in this WoW console stuff that's appeared and the new allied races that may be coming, eventually, be sure to hit that sub button. It'll be pretty fun. This is the beginning of a long, exciting journey together, so stick with me. This is going to be great stuff, and let's get into the video. Let's waste no time and start off with the mounts of Ardenweald. And first up, we've got 4 different tints of this base stag mount. You'll see the extremely fancy version of it in due course. Overall, at first glance, yeah, it looks like a pretty good stag. What I particularly love is the shape language, right? The lines are a little bit different, they're a little bit more smoothed than we've seen in the past. In terms of elements though, I'll tell you what I really love about this. So, I initially saw this at a glance, and I thought, oh, look, feathers. And then I'm like, wait, no, they're leaves. And then I looked at the saddle. Hey, they look like leaves as well. I think that is a really, really nice look. And as we move on through the tints, well, yeah, I mean, these are not the most impactful tints. I think these will just be selections based on your own personal choices. I do quite like the autumnal look, though, of, of the colors of the leaves on this guy. And then as we move forward to the final one, yeah, we see it's a pretty nice base mount. Of course, though, that is the base. Let's next talk about the more fancy version. Yeah, this guy is certainly out there trying to impress the ladies, if, I suppose, stags of the real world are anything to go by. So we got these big, beautiful horns. I love how we've got this arcane looking, well, maybe not arcane, but this like nature magic going on in their horns. Once again, the beautiful lines and shape language of this, really following through and advancing in a nice way. And as we go through the tints of this guy, once again, I think they're all looking pretty great. Now, in terms of when we look at the specifics here, what I think is pretty cool is these glowy lines. Of course, they're going to remind you of maybe root systems, veins, that sort of thing. Of course, this is Ardenweald. Some of those shapes remind me of what you actually see in the shapes of the grass of the floor in the Emerald Dream. Now, of course, Ardenweald is a dark mirror to the Emerald Dream. It's the death version of it, so I think that's a pretty cool little tidbit. And yes, suffice to say, this is a mount I absolutely will be getting. And for our next 3 Ardenweald mounts, well, it's something you've seen before. Yes, they made this rig and model in Legion, and my god, they certainly have got a lot of use out of it. That said, it is a beautiful, right? So the actual base work there is beautiful. These are 3, I'd say, very nice tints of it. Yeah, that's pretty much what this is. You've mostly all seen this before, so I'm just going to move on to the next one, which is rather impressive. Behold the 4 color variants of the Ardenweald Moth mount. Yeah, this thing is looking pretty damn fantastic, I've got to say. What I love here is this is a type of mount that we've never really seen before. Yes, we've had insects, we've had the bee, of course, of the most recent expansion, BFA, a bee that certainly did keep people waiting for quite some time to get. But yeah, this one is new. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. I'm thinking about particularly there are some Druid transmog sets from the past that are going to look absolutely incredible with some of the tints that are going on here. And of course, a lot of the Ardenweald stuff is also going to look really fantastic with these mounts. Yeah, this has got to be one of the stars of the show for me. Now that said, I do want to temper some of your expectations here. So this is a flying mount. Just to fill you in here, we saw loads of flying mounts in the alpha data mining for the Battle for Azeroth expansion. Of course, those flying mounts, well, they only made it in patch 8.2. So as much as, yes, we are looking at this right now, it could actually be 12 calendar months, potentially more, before you can actually get your hands on this. But still, more wonderful work from the team. Fantastic mounts. And then finally, you've seen the beauty of nature and Ardenweald, but of course, well, nature has got a lot more to it, and here we have got a pretty incredible mount. basically the composter. This is the kind of guy who's going to be living on the forest floor, nomming things up and, well, you know, turning it into compost. The cycle of life. What I really like here is we're seeing another side to the nature stuff. Often when you see nature stuff in games, it's just focused purely on beauty, whereas with this, we're actually getting something new and different. It's got this sort of trilobite look that I really like. I love the little glowing lights that are hanging above it as well. I think that is really cool. This is a fairly unique mount. This is really something for Ardenweald that you wouldn't have expected based on it just being, you know, Val'sharah, but at night with blue instead, which obviously is a reductive way of putting it. But yeah, this is a really nice mount. And as we go through the color variations, I think more so than some of the other Ardenweald mounts, we've got more color variations going on here. So hopefully the majority of these tints do actually make it to players. Very, very nice stuff indeed. And with this mount shown, that's actually us for Ardenweald. I've got to say, this one is going to be really hard to top for me. And next, it is time to bring you to Bastion, where once again, we have got our favorite horned horse, one we've seen many times before. I've got to say, though, some nice color tints here. I mean, the dark one, that's kind of similar to the one that we got from completing that big puzzle in Legion. But hey, I'll tell you what, I really like the golden one, actually. So there you go. It's that horse mount again. Let's move on. Next, we have 3 tints of the Winged Lion mount. Yeah, this guy is looking pretty cool. Definitely reminds me of that old store mount that you will have seen from Uldum. But yeah, pretty nice. I especially like the white and gold versions. I'm actually thinking that those white and gold versions would look pretty good with the Siege of Orgrimmar Paladin set. And of course, I imagine much of the Bastion set as well. He's got quite the face on him, actually. Very soft and cute rather than vicious, which I think is an interesting choice to go for. Certainly one that will look, will I think work for a lot of players. And yeah, I think especially what I like is the detail of the feathering. That is one thing that Blizzard just seems to get so well. I mean, the feather and the fur in the last few expansions has looked incredible. This is no difference. Once again, a fantastic situation, but I do have to give you that same caveat that I did with this being a flying mount, right? So this may only appear after Pathfinder is unlocked, and that may be patch 9.2. And speaking of lines, well, we've got 4 different automaton lines. This is the base model. So the whole deal, right, with the Kyrians and Bastion is that they have, yes, there's the Kyrians, but there's also these automatons that they use for various reasons, like training and here, quite obviously, riding about the place. So yeah, that's what's going on. If you actually look at them, I really like the blue sort of detailing thing for their tail. I think that's a really, really cool look. It reminds me a little bit of, well, actually some of the magic from Argus's Scythe. I think some of these would look really good with the vestments of the Eternal Traveler as well. Of course, in terms of what this model is going to be using, I mean, it'll be similar to, say, the cat mount that we got from Mechagon. Overall, though, I think pretty darn cool looking, and I, again, really like the tint variation. I think especially the white one and the gold one, they will look rather incredible for those really, you know, regal golden paladins and priests. That said, if you're a Shadow Priest, I think that purple one will suit you pretty darn well, too. Then, and in a very similar fashion, we have got the more spiced up version of that lion mount. If you take a look at it closely, what you notice is that blue energy, well, that's also coming out of their helm. And then you've got these new kind of details on the front legs, which again, you know, they're kind of like visual go fast stripes, okay? Like in terms of what, you know, the shape language and stuff of this mount. Overall, I think these are pretty darn cool looking. There are some people, I think, who won't really like automaton mounts. That's fair enough. As far as automaton style ones go, I think these are really good, especially the golden one, right? I just think white, gold, blue, I absolutely love it, and especially with that front view and the way that the blue energy actually looks with the gold. Yes, certainly. If you got those vestments of the Eternal Traveler, they certainly do want you to be able to match Mogs with it. I wonder why. And with that line covered, that's actually us done for Bastion. That said, I do imagine there will be other mounts. There's been a lower count here. Plus, of course, there is going to be a mount for every single Covenant, and we do not yet know if the mounts that you've just seen here are the Covenant ones. So that's what's up. Next up, let's move on to Maldraxxus. And we're going to start this one off with, well, just 6 chimeras. I've got to be real with you. These these are chimeras, right? Like, we have seen this model in the game. Yes, this is a version with a new coat of paint. I do especially like, if we actually hop into the details here, I really like what they've done with the protruding bones on the wings and also the skulls that they've got instead of regular heads, right? They've got that glowing energy, which I do expect will look a little bit better in-game than it is going to in a static model or a model viewer situation. But yeah, there you go. Nothing super new here, so let's just move on. Next for Maldraxxus as well, we've got what seems to be a reused rig, but a new model, and that is the Roc. Yeah, this is pretty darn cool. I think in just how much of a departure this mount is from other ones that we've seen, the sheer amount of bone that's everywhere, the rotting flesh. Gotta be real, it's not for me personally in terms of what I would want for my characters, but that said, I really do like bright, glowing things. I like my pretty stuff, I'll be real, so there's that. But certainly, if you're a Death Knight, an unholy Death Knight, and you like all that death and that decay, I think this is going to be a pretty darn fantastic mount for you. Next up, we do have something that's pretty darn new, and that is the Giant Beast. That's what it seems to be called in the game files. This is I think a really cool but horrible looking fellow. So we've got 5 different color variants of it that are, you know, they're pretty much on the more desaturated side, which obviously does work for what they're going for here. Yeah, you know, if you like protruding bone, if you are an undead Forsaken, I think it's going to work pretty well for you. What I like as a detail though is whenever you look at the back of it, you've got these 2 bone tails. And I've got to imagine when you're actually running around in this mount that they will, you know, move in a sort of a nice way. So I think that's another element to this mount that's a little bit more unique, right? That'll feel pretty cool. Now, if you actually look at the front view, I love its silhouette. You've got these 2 big, pretty nasty looking horns, and then the skull. Maldraxxus certainly is a place for skulls and spiky things. This guy absolutely is proving that for us. A really, really cool looking mount. But next, we've got to check out the armored version, which, I mean, yeah, it's the same dude, but it's covered in armor. That does mean that there's a little bit of the flesh that you can't see, but I'll tell you, I really like about this is there's just something about that armor. It is so crispy. The detailing work that has went in, like if you actually zoom into that armor, the rust effects, the edges are so crisp. The job they've done with like just the highlights around the edges. Blizzard's texture artists are incredible at their job, and it's just whenever we see things like fur and feathers and metal and stone and bone that you really do see that, and this mount is another fantastic example. And finally for Maldraxxus, we've got this guy. Yeah, he's pretty darn derpy looking. He is a boar. Don't know, have we seen a boar since Warlords of Draenor, right? I mean, maybe we've had our rest time in boars. Maybe it's time for another boar in World of Warcraft. So yeah, funky looking dude, I'll say that. His silhouette's got this interesting smoothness to it. I think it's because it's a hairless boar, and if you've ever seen like a hairless bear, or just in general, loads of hairless mammals, they are really, really freaky. I mean, hairless bears are basically horrifying. I'll get a picture of a hairless bear, you know, shot up on the screen for you. I mean, yikes. So yeah, if you look at this Maldraxxus boar mount, you can kind of see how it's transitioning from, you know, a boar into this one with no, you know, nothing on it, right? It's, yeah. Okay, so what does that actually mean? Well, if you want a pretty spooky, weird-looking mount, this guy is certainly going to do that for you. As I said, not really for me. I'm not a big fan of the undead stuff personally, but this is obviously, I think, a really well-executed piece of art. So, good job to the team. That is it for Maldraxxus so far. And with that, let's get on to Revendreath. We're going to kick Revendreath off with the giant vampire bat. Yeah, I think bats are probably a bit less popular these days for obvious reasons than they have been in the past, but hey, we're dealing with vampires. Bats obviously will make a lot of sense, and yeah, I mean, Blizzard are pretty good at making bats. It's weird, I mean, I look at this, I'm like, yeah, it's a bat, it's pretty cool, but it's not particularly groundbreaking. I think that's because we have seen quite a few bats in the game before. Now, what I will say is the little headpiece that the bats have got, I think that does look really nice. Adds another little bit of flair and, I guess, regalness to it, which does make a lot of sense when you think about Revendreath having its big castles. And certainly these guys, you can imagine them, you know, just perching the parapets, waiting for, well, some unlucky person to stumble by. So, a pretty cool mount. And with that, let's move on. Next up for Maldraxxus, we have got the Death Warg, a fairly interesting looking fellow. You may instantly think, oh, that's a bit of a derpy looking face, but if you think about it, right, this kind of looks like a gargoyle, okay? The sort of thing that you would imagine to be crafted in stone by some craft person hundreds of years ago. Just that no, now it's fleshy, it's moving about, and it's probably going to eat you. So we got this guy, we got a few different tints of him. I think the reddish one is my favorite though. I mean, come on, red, blood, vampires, Revendreath, pretty darn obvious. That's what's going on with the base version of this model. What I actually really like, before I move on to the armored version, just its front silhouette. It's so aggressive. Like, if you see that thing, it's the last thing you're going to be seeing. A really, really nice bit of work by the artists. And with that, let's move on to its more armored version. Of course, for Revendreath, well, more armored also means a little bit more regal. I mean, look at that throne that you're pretty much going to be riding around on. I love the two torches that you've got sticking out there. So you've got that, and then of course you have just got the various different color palettes for the armor. Once again, red and gold is the one that I like, because as you know, I tend to like, in cases like this, sort of saturated, pretty colors. Certainly, my thumbnails would suggest that, wouldn't they? Sorry, artists, I know I really do blow them up. Yeah, a really, really nice looking mount. Not too much extra to say here, just that it kind of does remind me of the PvP mounts, like the way that it's basically just a walking tank. I mean, if the last one looked aggressive, this one certainly does look more aggressive. Now that said, you do actually lose a little bit of the view of its face, so you could see that as a con, but I think for me, they almost feel like two more different mounts because of the way you can't see as much of its face. Though a part of me does just imagine it going full Ore Gorger mode when I look at the front silhouette. Of course, that would be pretty bad for the rider. So there you go. That is it for Revendreath. Next up, we've got the Devourer Mite, who is, I think, a fairly interesting looking fellow. He's got some of that blue glow that reminds you of Ardenweald, but if you actually look at him, I mean, he totally looks like a denizen of Maldraxxus. So yeah, pretty interesting looking dude. It does look a little bit small when you view it here, but then you've got to imagine this in the context of, well, a player riding on top of it, which does make the entire affair seem rather more horrifying given, well, how creepy this guy is and how big it's actually going to be when you're walking around the place. So there you go. That's that guy. Certainly, I would not like him to be nibbling on me. Next, we've got our one mount from the Maw. Wow, this one is really cool, because if you look at it, oh, there's nothing inside. It's animated armor. I don't know if we've had a mount like that before in the game. And really, when we're dealing with a game that has got so many hundreds of mounts, it's these situations like this and the Moth that really do get me excited. So overall, you've got 4 different tints of this. The tints don't feel super different from each other though, which is maybe a little bit unfortunate. When I think about this in the context of everything that's going on with the Maw though, I mean, yeah, you've got a whole bunch of enemies in the Maw that almost look like reanimated Lich King armor. So I think this is very, very, very fitting with that. You can see the runes that are carved into him. At some point, I would love to actually get a reference for those runes to see if they actually mean anything, because if they did, there is so much stuff in the game you could go back and sort of look at and try to reinterpret. I think what really I like about this one the most, though, is the head. There's just something about the lines on it that are so crisp, and just knowing that that's made out of metal makes it feel so vicious. And that really is exactly what you would be wanting from the Maw, which is supposed to be the real dangerous feeling endgame only zone. Now that said, I just said the word vicious, and speaking of vicious, well, we do have one final set of mounts to show you. Well, I hope you like spiders, because if you like spiders and you're a PvPer, you're in luck. If you don't, maybe less so. Yes, we have got the Alliance and the Horde versions of the Vicious War Spider, something that will, of course, be joining the Vicious family that includes, well, the hippos and the sabers and all of that good stuff. Yeah, this one is bloody horrible, and I mean that in the best way, right? Like, if you don't like spiders, this is probably the ultimate spider that you do not like. I think especially the one that I like the most, though, is the Horde version. The Horde version just has those classic Forsaken colors. You've got the purple, you've got the green, and the way that the green kind of Okay, so if you actually look at it closely, you see that the limbs of the spider, the legs, are green at the bottom. But what I really love that the artists have done here is if you then look at the metal, you can almost see a little bit of that of the green glowing through at the bottom and at the sides. And yeah, that's just a really, really nice effect. So between that and, of course, that Forsaken style armor, I think the Horde one is looking incredible. The Alliance one is also quite nice. It's not traditional Alliance color, so it's a little bit more varied there. But yeah, there you go. That is your vicious spiders. Then just to cap off this video, I should mention there are some data mined mount names that we actually just don't have model fors right now. So there is a Phalanx mount and an Epic Phalanx mount. I think they quite obviously will be coming from Bastion. I'd imagine that you're dealing with some sort of big automaton there. There's then also the Gilded Prowler, so when we actually look at its description, though, we see that it's described as an apex predator. That means it's not an automaton, so unlike a few of the mounts that you saw from Bastion, yeah, it's going to be an organic one. We then also have a Gargan and an Epic Gargan, which sounds sort of similar to a Gorgon, and that does, yes, make me think that it's going to be another Revendreath mount. And then there's also one called Gorm. What that could be, I'm not 100% sure, but if I think about that name, it does sound a little bit more similar to the undead stuff, which is making me, of course, think Maldraxxus. And there you go. That is all of the data mine mounts that, well, have appeared thus far. If any more do surface, I will be sure to add them to our planned big sort of roundup, mop-up video that will cover just about everything that's sort of minor yet important, and even some important things like the AoE changes, which are pretty big, the allied race requirements, and a bunch of other stuff. Now, if you'd like some behind the scenes, some physical loot, and more stuff, then check out our Patreon. Our team is now tripled. It was 2 in the last expansion, or the last alpha. Now it's 6, so that's why we can make so much content so fast. But, well, with what's out there in the world right now, ad rates have fallen off a cliff, so the extra help has been super appreciated. In return, you will get, we'll get as much content to you as we possibly can, and the physical stuff. And also, we're going to be doing as much work as we can to help make WoW better, to help the devs, and we're committing our own internal resources to doing audience feedback projects that are going to make their way actually back to the devs. So hopefully that will help them out. Thank you for all your help. A lot more stuff to come, so yes, I will see you soon.